Welcome back to Carib 21, where we share what's trending in and around the Caribbean. If it's your first time joining us, please feel free to like, share, and hit that subscription button for more amazing content. So, in today's video, I would like to call Candace Owens and Melanie King to the front of the class. I would like to give you ladies a Caribbean history lesson. So a few weeks ago, Candace Owens decided to launch what she calls her own private investigation on Vice President Harris' Jamaican ancestry. And as I said in previous videos, I'm okay with that. Like, it's okay for Candace Owens to do whatever she's doing. That is American politics. I don't really care much about that. Where I come in now is because a lot of information that Candace Owens is putting out there now about my beautiful island, Jamaica, is inaccurate. And she's also putting out information without knowing Jamaica and the Caribbean culture. So what I'm here to do is to correct and to pretty much give her a history lesson on the Caribbean. And I know Candace Owens, she's been off for a week now, but I see Melanie King decided that she's going to take up the same thing. And she also started with Bustamante and trying to connect Bustamante to a communist Cuba. So that is what I'm here to clear up today. So let's talk about it.
That was her political vision. She loved Bustamante. He just adopted that name, Bustamante.
I want to add a little bit more context about Bustamante. So this is directly from the Wikipedia page. Okay. And it says, of course, she said there what his real name is. Like, he changed his name, which is something that a lot of operatives, a lot of communists do multiple times. So he was Sir William Alexander Clark Bustamante, but he was born William Alexander Clark, and then he added Bustamante. Now, he added Bustamante after this. It says, however, Bustamante did not leave Jamaica until 1905 when he was 21 years old. And he left as part of the early Jamaican migration to Cuba, where employment opportunities were expanding in the sugar industry. He returned to Jamaica permanently about 30 years later in the 1930s. Little is known about Bustamante's 30 years spent outside of Jamaica. So from 21 to 51, no information is known about this man until he then returned to Jamaica to, look at here, he became a leader in activism against colonial rule. All right. And that looks very noble. That looks, really great that he's going against, colonial rule and all these different things. But it wasn't going against colonial rule because he believed in all of that. There is something to be said. And in fact,
so first thing here, if you really wanted Jamaicans to take you serious, that you're doing an investigation, at least get the name right, pronunciation. Everybody has a Jamaican friend. Jamaicans are everywhere. We're like salt. Everywhere in the world you go, you'll find a Jamaican. So I'm sure you have a Jamaican friend or an associate. So at least get the pronunciation right. It's not Bustamante. It's Bustamante. That's how Jamaicans pronounce it. Bustamante. So that is the first thing, the first lesson. And as I said, if you wanted Jamaicans to take you serious, at least get the pronunciation right. It reminds me, like when I was a child and Jamaicans used to go abroad, like go to New York or Canada, and some people go on farm work programs and they'll go for 6 months, and you'd have people come back and they're twanging. And in Jamaica, we call it twang. Like, you go to a foreign country and all of a sudden you are fluent in the way how they talk, and you come back to Jamaica and you're like, yeah, man, like I was in New York, and that's how it sounds when it sounds like a Jamaican twanging. Bustamante, he went away and he changes his name, Bustamante. We're not going to take you serious. That is the first lesson. Okay, so secondly, if you are going to try to tie Bustamante to a communist Cuba, at least do your research. At least try to cover all your grounds. Because if you had done your research, you would have realized that it don't make sense. Like the timing does not make sense. So, okay, let's go back. So Bustamante, 21 years old, left Jamaica, went to Cuba in 1905 to pursue, as we saw the information, to pursue a career in the thriving sugar industry in Cuba. That is facts. We're right there where that is concerned. We're on the same wavelength where that is concerned. He went to Cuba and he was working in the sugar industry. But where you mess up is not doing a research on Cuban history. So let me give you a history lesson of Cuba. So Cuba gained independence in 1898 after a 3-year war with the Spanish, and the Cuban was one of the first countries after Haiti to really fight for their independence. So Cuba fought for their independence between 1895 and 1898 when Cuba gained independence. So between the early 1900, like 1902, if you had done your research, you would have found out that during the time period of 1902 to 1959, the Americans occupied Cuba. Yes, that is correct. Occupation. There was an American occupation of the island of Cuba from 1902 to 1959. When did Bustamante get to Cuba? 1905. Throughout all of Bustamante's 30 years in Cuba, Cuba was under American occupation. So what if you look closely, and this is information that anyone can find online. So Cuba, the American government pretty much influenced whatever went on politically in Cuba from 1902 to 1959. And in my last visit to Cuba, and for anyone who's watching that been to Cuba can testify that when you go to Cuba, you'll see two countries stand out. You'll see the Spanish influence in terms of the buildings, in terms of the churches. Some of the oldest churches in the world you'll find in Cuba, and those are of Spanish influence. Also, when you go to Cuba, you look at the cars, and you'll see 90% of the cars are American-made cars, and those cars are now vintage cars where Cubans remodel those cars and upkeep them in a way that is mind-boggling to most people. When you go to Cuba and you see like a 1940, one of the first, like just say like a Ford that came out, the first built Ford ever, and you see it on the road in Cuba looking beautiful and running as taxi and giving tours. Like people wonder, how did the Cuban people restore these cars so perfectly? So when you go to Cuba, the American influence in terms of the car, in terms of the infrastructure, the Spanish influence is still there. So if you did that research, you'd have realized that there's no way that Bustamante could have gone to Cuba, a communist Cuba, to be trained, because America was in charge during all of Bustamante's 30 years in Cuba. That's lesson number 2. Okay, and lesson number 3, which is information that anyone can find if they do their research, is that before the Cuban Revolution, Cuba was a playground for the rich and famous Americans. A lot of millionaires, multi-millionaires at the time, that's where they would go to party. And when you look at people like Celia Cruz, which is the true salsa queen, when you look at her and you look at people that she looked up to in Cuba that time in terms of salsa music, and Americans would go there to be entertained with some performance like they have never seen before. This is way before like Hollywood, and Cuba was that place where a lot of Americans went for entertainment. And there are also information out there online that Americans between that time, between 1925 to when the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Americans spent over $50 million buying property in Cuba. So that is information out there for everyone to see. So what I'm saying is that a Bustamante could not go to Cuba to practice to be a commie, as Candace Owens was saying. So to call Bustamante a commie, like to say like he's a communist, is like saying the earth is flat. That's my point. So Bustamante could never have been in Cuba studying to be a communist leader to take that back to Jamaica. So that is it. And to continue the conversation, one of the things now I realized that Melanie King, who joined in on Candace Owens' investigation or so-called investigation, is trying to say that with Bustamante and the trade union, in her last video, she was trying to, I don't know, insinuate that there's something up with Bustamante coming back to Jamaica and starting the Bustamante trade union to fight colonial rule. Like, she was saying that there's something up with that. But what I can tell you is that, yes, Bustamante would have learned in Cuba because Cuba was ahead of Jamaica at that time in terms of trade union. Jamaica, we saw there were trade union established in Jamaica before the Bustamante trade union. You know, in Jamaica history, like everyone can remember the Morant Bay Rebellion with one of our national hero, Paul Bogle. And that rebellion, Morant Bay Rebellion, was about unfair treatment, unfair long work hours, and stuff like that. So there were unions being formed in Jamaica before, but Bustamante Trade Union was one of the first real organized trade union that got a lot of respect. And so for Candace Owens and Melanie King to think that the trade union, the Bustamante Trade Union was somehow set up with some communist agenda. Let me explain what was achieved from the Bustamante Trade Union, because I was a member of the Bustamante Trade Union working in Jamaica. I was also one of like a leader, because at each workplace you would have leaders in those workplaces from the trade union. So let's establish since the Bustamante Trade Union was formed in Jamaica, and these are not only achievements from that trade union, but from all trade unions that have been involved in Jamaica. So what we got paid vacation, 2 weeks paid vacation that we didn't have before, right? We had maternity leave, which we didn't have before. We have a pension scheme, which we didn't have before. We had, what came out of it also was we have a NHT, which I don't know of any other country in the world that has that, which is a national housing trust where Jamaicans are able to pay into a system and to borrow money from that system to purchase their first home. So these are just some of the stuff that came out of the trade union being in Jamaica. So if that is coming, well, I guess we're communists then, and I guess America is the same thing, because I know Americans enjoy a lot of freedom in terms of like paid time off and maternity leave, and those were all because of trade union. So that is another thing that I'd like to clear up, that the Bustamante, the BITU, Bustamante Trade Union, a lot of Jamaicans benefited because of that trade union and the other trade union that came before and trade unions that came after. So I couldn't end this video without doing some lessons also for some of the crazy people in the comment section. There are some people in the comment section who are pretending to be Jamaicans, but I can tell that they're not from Jamaica because everything that they were saying did not make any sense. So for those people, this is for you. So there are people in the comment section questioning the migrations of Jamaicans, stating that, oh, why would Jamaican people leave Jamaica? Because Jamaica was using the British pound at the time and the Jamaican dollar was stronger than the US dollar, and it doesn't make any sense. And why would you leave a farm to go work on a farm in the US? So for you guys who are asking those questions, who are saying that you're Jamaicans, I know you're not Jamaicans, because if you were, you would not be asking those questions. So this lesson is for you. So as I stated in previous video, immigration is not something new to Jamaica. Jamaicans have been leaving Jamaica from the late 1800s. So even going back to 1870, 1875. So most Jamaicans, or all Jamaicans, would know George Steeble. That is the first black millionaire that's recorded in Jamaica history. If you go to Jamaica, you'll see the Devon House, which is one of Jamaica's premier tourist destination in Kingston, where you'll get some of the best ice cream in the world, and you'll get other stuff like, now I know they have like oxtail patty, they have curry goat patty and stuff like that. That location was the home of Jamaica's first black millionaire. He left Jamaica and went to Venezuela, Venezuela being one of the first country being freed, which Haiti sent soldiers to help Venezuela in their revolution to be free. So he went to Venezuela and he made his money in gold mining, and it said that he was a carpenter. So Jamaicans leaving Jamaica is not something new. And for those, again, who know Jamaica history, know that the Panama Canal, when the Panama Canal was being built, most of the labor that was used to build the Panama Canal came from Jamaica. And funny story, like I moved to Bermuda some 15 years ago, and I met this guy that I was working with from Panama. People saw us together and they were like, you guys look like twins. And talking to him, like he said that his great-great-grandfather came to Panama from Jamaica to build the canal. So a lot of Jamaicans that went to Panama stayed in Panama, and a lot of the black population that you'll see in Panama today, a lot of them are of Jamaican ancestry. So for people to question like, oh, the immigration thing with Jamaica, this is not new. As I stated in a video, previous video to this, the first wave of immigration that took place in Jamaica after slavery, the first wave of migration, Jamaicans leaving to go to Venezuela, Jamaicans leaving to go to Haiti, Jamaicans leaving for the canal in Panama, Jamaicans leaving for Cuba also, which we saw Bustamante was one of those Jamaicans who went to Cuba. So that is a history lesson for those people that are pretending to be Jamaican, questioning why would Jamaicans leave. Because to think that, to kind of insinuate that in the early 1900s that Jamaica was somehow prosperous, that means you have no clue about Jamaica history. So that's lesson number one for those people in the comment section who are pretending to be Jamaicans. And lesson number two for those people in the comment section, and this is why I know that you're not Jamaican, because if you knew about Jamaica history, Jamaica culture, then you would not be confusing a Jamaican farm with a farm that you will see in America and Canada. When you go to one of these farms in America and Canada and you're seeing these heavy duty equipments, you're seeing thousands of acres of land where you have to drive from point A to point B. You have to use these heavy machinery to get your crop. This is not what Jamaica farm is about. Most of the farms in Jamaica operate like a mom and pop farm. There are farms in Jamaica where you'll own a farm, you'll live on the farm, your house is there, you'll come out in the morning, you'll go pick your tomatoes, you'll go get your bananas, you'll go get your callaloo, your onion, banana, whatever, And if you are the farmer, just say like, I'm the farmer, I'm living with my family, I go get it. My wife and my kids, they would go to the market and they'll sell it. That is the difference with a Jamaican farm. So that is how I know that a lot of people that are commenting in the comment section, they have no idea about the culture of what goes on in the Caribbean and the difference between a Caribbean farm from one of these big, massive farms in North America that supply these multi-billion-dollar companies that produce like, say, like tomato sauce or corn or cornflakes and stuff like that. These farms are different. And to close things off now, I'm going to talk about what would be considered the largest wave of migration from Jamaica, and that was from back in the mid-50s. So the Windrush movement is the one that people talks about the most, because Jamaica still being under the British at that time, Jamaicans were allowed to go back and forth to the UK. And within that Windrush movement, we saw thousands of Jamaicans leaving Jamaica to go to the United Kingdom to help to develop that country. They went to do different types of jobs, from low-paying domestic jobs to factory work to building roads. And you think of it, Jamaicans were in the UK doing it. But what is not talked about a lot is about the hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans also that went to places like New York, to places like Miami, to places like Toronto, to places like Montreal. Right within that time frame also, from the late 50s to the mid 1960s, 1965 to 1967, that wave of Jamaicans that left, a lot of them, when you look at Canada, Toronto, Canada, when you look at black culture in Canada, a lot of it is influenced by Jamaican culture. And that is because when that wave was happening back in the 1955, coming through to 1967, most of the people that left the Caribbean at that time came from Jamaica. At that time, Trinidad and Tobago being the second largest English-speaking Caribbean, and what would be considered the second largest of the British West Indies, because the Windrush movement was pretty much the British Caribbean island. There were no other islands involved apart from the ones that the British controlled. And those were the ones that made up the Windrush movement. And when you look at a place like Toronto, most of those Caribbean immigrants came from Jamaica, because at the time, Trinidad and Tobago was doing way better than any other island, because that was right around the time when Trinidad started to boom because of the discovery of oil and natural gas in Trinidad. So the Trinidad economy was doing well. A lot of Trinidadians weren't leaving at that time. So a lot of Jamaicans, a lot of people from Barbados, Vincentian, they were going to the UK, they were going to New York, they were coming to Toronto, Montreal. So for people in the comment section to think to try and insinuate that Jamaica was doing so well at that time and why would people leave, obviously don't know Caribbean history. So that is it. I'm going to leave it right here. And this was a free history lesson. If you enjoyed this lesson, please do me a favor and like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. Peace. I'm out.